We all wear clothes. Whether you like it or not, we are expected to wear at least some level of them on a daily basis. But where do yours come from? Online? The mall? The thrift store? Many Americans today have turned to what is known as fast and ultra-fast fashion to outfit their wardrobes, in part due to only 3% of clothes today being manufactured stateside.
I'm Vicki Pass. I am a professor and I'm also chair of the Department of the History of Art, Design, and Visual Culture at Maryland Institute College of Art. Fast fashion is the production of clothing in less robust material, more synthetic material, with less quality and care into making garments that are not intended to last for many years in a person's wardrobe, but are rather intended to be worn a couple times and then kind of disposed of.
As of 2025, it is reported that 57% of global Gen Z consumers shop for clothing and shoes online, with that number only expected to grow. And with eco-nightmare brands like Amazon, Shein, and Temu hogging the market share of those purchases, it's no wonder that the apparel industry is expected to use over 1/4 of the world's carbon budget by the year 2050. The mall may seem like a more carbon-friendly option, but those clothes still almost always come from fast fashion brands that pollute the planet and harm their employees with below minimum wages, long hours, and potentially dangerous working environments. What about thrift stores? While this is the most friendly option of the bunch thus far, clothes left behind for too long most often end up in the same place, the landfill. Why do we buy these clothes though? Well, they're cheap and accessible. Given today's economy, which can feel like it takes more than it gives, many consumers report fast fashion as their only option. But what if there's another way?
Hi, I'm Venus Stanton. I'm currently a shop gremlin at a local fabric store, also a part-time teacher. So dress-wise, I'm not very fashionable in my own sense anymore because I like to be comfortable. But my friend said that my main fashion sense in terms of designing is that I turn people into evil supervillains for the Powerpuff Girls.
People like Venus are helping their community to rediscover the possibility of sewing your own clothes.
I think that sewing clothes helps you feel more comfortable in your body. You're making something that is uniquely your own. And every time I get pants from the store, I literally tailor them and people think I spent $300 on pants, and I'm like, no, I got this for $5 in the Goodwill bin, and I just tailored it myself. So it's just a good skill to have, and then you can also just wear your clothes for a lot longer.
Many listeners may feel intimidated by learning to sew, as there's a relatively steep initial learning curve, time commitment, and buy-in cost.
I mean, if you know how to drive, I think you can try a new skill. When you're an adult, it's really hard to try new things. I started learning how to roller skate this year and it's so embarrassing to be bad at something, but we need to be bad at things the rest of our life because it's good for your brains. But just do it. Don't be scared. Why be embarrassed, If you have no money, that's not a problem because most libraries now, with your library card, you can literally check out a sewing machine. And then a lot of community centers will have sewing-based classes and community events. There's always someone in your community that knows how to sew. 9 times out of 10, they'll be more than happy to teach you how to sew for free.
The real question is, how did we culturally get from a place where we mostly sewed our own clothes like Venus to here?
I am not a maker of clothes. I admire people who are makers of clothes. It is not a skill I possess. I can make pillows. I can sew straight lines on my machine.
While she may not sew herself and instead chooses to shop for specifically sustainable brands, Vicki Pass's research into the story of dress helps to explain why people, including herself, have stopped sewing. That all starts with the rise of fast fashion.
I think about the beginnings of fast fashion happening in the 1960s, which I think is earlier than most people would think. And the reason for that is that that's a time when you start to see boutiques like Mary Quant running not on a seasonal cycle. She's really one of the people that innovates this, but she would just put new clothes out when she had new clothes and didn't really pay attention. And in many ways, somebody like Mary Quant was doing, or Barbara Kulchansky at Biba, is they were sort of rejecting the Paris fashion system and rejecting kind of the stuffiness of what they saw as their parents' generation of clothing, inserting something that was not about being lasting forever and was about sort of youth and newness and kind of a different like set of priorities. So around 1968, I want to say, you get this like moment of paper dresses that are like literally disposable garments that, unlike previous generations, that those garments don't have to last. You know, in some ways, certainly in the case of somebody like Mary Quant, who experienced the war years in Britain and experienced rationing, like it was a kind of rejection of that like make, do, and mend kind of culture.
Long before fast fashion, there were people of diverse bodies wearing clothes. People made their own for the largest part, unless they could afford to go to an individual who would hand make their clothing based upon their measurements.
I started 5 years ago in earnest, really posting on Instagram and sharing my research. And something I've thought about over that period is, how do we diversify the images that we're looking at when we study fashion and look at what people are wearing when we talk about fashion, so that we're not just showing like slim white women in clothes, but showing that like men and women of all races and body types and classes engage in fashion. And because I'm fat, like it's something that's of interest to me personally as somebody who deals with the realities of like shopping for clothing and the persistent anti-fatness that's part of the fashion industry.
Did you know, though, that the system so many find deeply frustrating and demeaning has its origins in the Civil War? At the time, there was a sudden need for really the first time in America's history to mass manufacture clothing at a rapid-fire pace. For this reason, a series of 3 measurements, the chest, the waist, and the inseam, were taken of enlisted soldiers to get them into battle-ready clothes that fit them quote-unquote good enough to fight in. While in 1881, dress pattern maker Charles Hecklinger started putting out pattern blocks for women, they took a great deal of measurements to produce accurately, given the higher number of curves to account for when compared to men. In 1939, the U.S. Department of Agriculture tried to standardize the women's dress system by measuring 15,000 women using their bust size as the starting point. However, this failed miserably since the women measured were almost exclusively low-income and white. Eventually, in 1983, after a series of unsuccessful attempts to remedy the mistakes of the 1939 study, the U.S. government eventually dropped the regulations on standard sizing, leaving brands to fend for themselves. As a result, so-called quote-unquote vanity sizing popped up, a system in which different brands assign bigger or smaller numbers to the same technical dress sizes to elicit purchases by customers concerned with fitting a certain number. Sewing one's clothes is the first line of defense against the messy practice of standardized sizing, and Mary Worrell, the director of collections at the Michigan State University Museum, sees even more benefit to sewing than just that.
By creating your own clothes, you really are choosing how you're visually presenting your voice. So you are going one step more than going and purchasing that piece to create that voice. So I think kind of that idea of active resistance by rejecting norms of dress, maybe you're creating your own way, that's a form of resistance, and by resisting consumerism, by resisting harming the planet, sewing your own clothes can really be an act of resistance.
As a final note, even though 63% of fashion brands continue to lag far behind 2030 decarbonization goals, only 18% of executives in those same companies saw sustainability as a growth risk in 2025. The industry is a long way from making any form of change to its climate and consumer practices, so it may be time for you to make that change for yourself. This feature was written by Michaela Connors. Special thanks to Vina Stanton, Vicky Pass, and Mary Worrell for their interviews.